Hey everyone, Tony here. Um, if you could please let me know if you can see my screen and hear my voice and all of that. I've been having some computer issues this morning, and or this afternoon, I guess. It said that my internet wasn't connected at one point, so that isn't good. The good news is that I'm recording everything on this end, so we should be covered. Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and also thank you to everyone for being flexible. I think most, if not all of you, have been with me long enough to know that normally I'm very consistent in my class schedules. But with us moving full time into the rig this weekend, Saturday, there's a lot of stuff that isn't quite going the way we planned. Like, for instance, our truck. We were having um, an extra fuel tank installed and a bed cover, and well, they were supposed to be done with that yesterday, and it's still not done. And we were supposed to move our RV yesterday from the campground that it's been at for the past month to the new campground that's a little closer to us so that we can finish moving in. And so then there's the weather. We didn't really want to have to do all of that in the rain, but yet the rain is coming. So we've been having to really juggle a lot back and forth just to kind of make everything work. So hence the schedule juggling a little bit. I am not working from the rig yet, Val. However, Sunday's Insider video should be from the rig, provided hopefully we'll get everything up and running with our Wi-Fi in our RV by then. That's kind of the plan. So anyway, enough of my crazy life. Let's get into the training, because I have some really cool stuff to share with you today about comic books and graphic novels. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go full screen here. Oh, actually, I already am full screen. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a moment and do a quick intro, and then we'll dive into today's training. Hello, everyone. Welcome to AI Storyteller Strategies. This is your host and teacher, Tony Leidig. And welcome to Module 3. We're going to be talking about comic books and graphic novels today and how you can leverage the latest AI tools to help you create those. If nothing else, they will save you a bunch of time, but I've spent a lot of time over the last week or two just really fine-tuning some prompts that I think you're going to just find awesome, to be honest with you. But anyways, and then as I was sharing, and you've probably seen through the various announcements, Module 4 is going to be tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern, where we'll wrap up this course. I have another one just about ready to go, but I probably won't talk about that much or email on it until after we are officially moved into our rig, our RV. So that'll be sometime next week that I'll email on that. But anyway, so what we're going to do is, okay. So we're going to talk about the structure of comics. Good place to start. I don't know how many of you are interested in comics or not. Personally, I love them. I'm not obsessed by them like some folks are, but I've always been fascinated by the storytelling aspect of it and by the art. Absolutely love the art. And, usually it's very gritty and, the whole purpose of comics is to visually be able to tell stories really quickly. And so just the dynamic that takes place between the art itself, the dialogue and narrative, and then the spaces between the panels even, there's just an interactive dynamic there that you really don't have in any other kind of medium. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy them. I mean, you could probably count on two hands the number of comics that I have currently, mostly because I sold a bunch of them. But both comics and graphic novels work very, very similarly. And so, Ganti said, comics are not my cup of tea, but maybe today's webinar may change that. Well, if you love storytelling, this is just another approach to doing that. And so we'll see as we go along here. So it's important to understand the structure of comics and graphic novels because, as I mentioned, it is different from anything else that we've talked about before. It's different from illustrated children's books or any other kind of illustrated books. And so even if you don't know anything specifically about comics, hopefully with the information that I have to share with you, it will aid in you having a better understanding, not only of how it all works, but how to actually have success in creating them. So comics and graphic novels are visual narratives that tell stories through a combination of words and pictures. And the story is divided into pages and panels, with each page representing a distinct unit of storytelling. And so you could kind of think of it this way, like as you go through the story, it's very scene specific. So between how the panels are laid out and the narrative that's happening, and even the page structure itself, it's like this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And then mentally, you're filling in a lot of those in-betweens through a combination of the imagery itself and just reading into the story itself. So in a lot of respects, you could say that unlike many other forms of storytelling, comics are very participatory because everyone who reads the same comic is going to have a slightly different experience depending on how they're mentally filling in the gaps that are a natural part of the comic storytelling process. And so the panels themselves, just for definition's sake, are boxes that contain individual scenes and are arranged on a page to create a sense of pacing and rhythm. And so the space between the panels, called the gutter, is where the reader's imagination fills in the gaps between the panels. And so this is a screenshot of a comic that's in the public domain. And so you can see here that there isn't a lot of words. It's not like how we would see traditional storytelling, but yet there's a lot that we can glean from just looking at this page. We have a narrative, which is what's in the box, a little bit of dialogue, mostly the dog barking and the guy screaming as he's running away. But there's a lot that we can really glean from just looking at the various pictures themselves. You can see how the different elements of the dog just in these three pictures alone. You can get a sense of the fear of the guy with regard to the dog and how he reacts to the dog and how the dog responds back to him. Even though there really isn't anything much that talks about the guy's fear, it's communicated there. And so, I mean, how do you describe emotion normally? Well, it's somewhat easier to project visually versus, spending however long it takes to describe what fear looks like. Okay, so that's one of the cool elements of it. So along with that, you have the artwork, which includes character designs, backgrounds, visual effects, which could be anything from like using Well, like a classic idea that just came to mind would be like in some of the superhero comics, like Batman or Superman. You have POW, like when somebody hits somebody. Say Batman is punching Penguin in the face, and it has POW, really big. So you know exactly what's going on. It's a visual element that helps communicate the impact of what the scene is displaying. And so all of these things together support and enhance the narrative. Then, of course, you also have speech bubbles, captions, and even sound effects that you can use to convey dialogue, narration, and sound in the story. Very often, the speech bubbles, whenever somebody's actually talking, it has like the little triangle thing going down to their mouth, but there's also like the little circles, like if somebody's thinking a thought, or just other ways of providing, just with simple text, really communicating additional elements to the story. And so, comic book writers and artists will work together to create a cohesive visual language that communicates the story effectively. In this training, we're going to use a different kind of comic book writer and artist, and that is AI. And so, one of the great benefits and draws of comics and graphic novels over many other types of books is that they're often serialized. So you can read them in a series or even as a standalone. So they're written, each book. Like one thing you've probably noticed is that you can have a comic, an individual comic, and that in and of itself will stand on its own. And then in some cases, a whole series will be gathered together to create a graphic novel, which that will stand alone by itself. And then there can be multiple graphic novels that are in a series. And so it's really a very unique dynamic that's much different than anything else that we normally think about. And you can see here this one, compare it. This is from the same story that we saw on the last page, but this one has a lot more panels in its single page here, which again speaks to pacing and those kinds of things, like what's happening. Now, when it comes to crafting the story, there are strategies for crafting a compelling and coherent story that integrates with the visual storytelling of the comics and graphic novels. And I wanted to include this section because even though we're going to be using some prompt formulas to generate these stories, it's important to understand how they really work apart from AI. So if you have that as a basic foundation, it can actually help guide you through the process of creating a story for a comic or a graphic novel. And so, just like most stories, you want to establish a clear and compelling premise or concept for the story. You'd also refer to that as a plot. What is the overarching theme? What do you want to see happen from beginning to end? And that's really where you want to begin. Excuse me. The plot itself has to be engaging. You want the story to move forward at a solid pace. And you also want to make sure that, like any good story, that there's conflict, that there's stakes involved, and then ultimately, of course, the payoff is the resolution of that conflict. And along with that, you want to develop complex and interesting characters that readers can connect with. And we often see that play out in like a television series or something like that, where you have the character and they're taking certain actions, but then you can go back and develop their backstory along with it, so that at some point there's a payoff in understanding why they took the actions that they did, or what motivated them to do a certain thing or say a certain thing, just like any good movie, any good TV show, or other types of books. And then there's also the setting, and the setting is basically the environment where the the comic takes place, the world. And it could be real world, it could be fantasy world, it doesn't really matter which direction you choose to take it in. But you want to make sure, once again, that that setting and the world is immersive and interesting. Your goal from a creation perspective is to want people to be there, the reader, as they're reading through it. You want them to be drawn into the story so that they just really have a desire to explore that world along with your characters. And so you can use visual storytelling techniques to convey the story elements and add depth to the narrative. So in other words, you don't want to reveal everything all at once. You can take your time, and that's part of the pacing process, part of the exploration of the story, and even the characters themselves. It just, and again, in this particular case, we're not using words to tell the story so much as we're using the visuals. Okay, so you have the visuals from the various panels that move throughout the comic. And so overall, your goal is to create a strong and satisfying story arc that resolves the story's central conflict. And honestly, that can happen over the course of a single comic, or at least achieve a certain resolution that takes place. But in other words, you can have like a huge story arc that takes place over several issues. And then there's a certain amount of gratification that takes place as the main character makes a discovery. So in say the end of one of the comics, so it gives you the sense of completion, but there's more to the process. If you think about some of your favorite TV shows, like we just finished watching Battlestar Galactica from 20 years ago, and several seasons and all of that. Well, they didn't give up, the storyline and the character and all of that in the first episode. They did some brief introductions, but ultimately you found out that nobody really was who you thought they were. And in some cases, that took multiple seasons to accomplish that. And it was just kind of fun to see how, even in the later season, in the final season, how there were some questions that they left kind of lingering that you didn't even know the answer to until toward the end. And we can do that same kind of thing with comics and graphic novels, because probably I would say the closest association that we have from a visual storytelling perspective would be a television series. It's the same kind of thing. Maybe even video games to a certain extent, especially with the way video games are these days. I'm not much of a video game person. I tried. I really wanted to get involved. I mean, back in the day when there was like Pong, I was all about that life. But and even some of the early stand-up video games, I remember going to the boardwalk in Ocean City, New Jersey, and spending an entire afternoon playing video games, but then I became an adult and things changed. You have kids, you have responsibilities. So it just never stuck with me. Now, we've sold a lot of video games with our store that we had, but still the storytelling process is very similar with some of the video games, like Witcher: The Wild Hunt is one that really comes to mind, which they're also spitting into a TV series, the next chapter in the TV series that's coming out here in another month. And so you want to keep that in mind as we're going along. And so use pacing and structure to create a cohesive and well-paced story. In other words, be careful how you're structuring the action and how it takes place over time. And you don't want to go so hyper-focused on details initially that it just hangs up the story because you just spent 5 pages describing who the character is in every detail. Well, nobody cares about that. let your reader make up some of that on their own. And of course, as we get into using the AI itself, you'll see kind of how this plays out, because I'm going to share some prompts where we can create a persona for the AI so that it understands the comic writing process. Now, one of the unique parts of comic books, of graphic novels, is how dialogue and narration play out. And so the role of dialogue and narration in conveying information, character development, and even the tone in the graphic novels can be used to convey information about the story world, about the characters themselves, and even the plot. You can tell just through how the dialogue works that what's really going on. So you're kind of, I guess one way you could think about it is that in essence, the narrative, which is what you normally see in like the boxes, and the dialogue that's happening between the characters, think of it this way, like very much like how we're teaching right now, right? We're playing off of bullet points. And in some respects, narration and dialogue are very much like that. They're providing the highlights, the bullet points, and then the reader uh, fills in a lot of those blanks based on the visuals that are there and that are happening. And so, dialogue can also reveal character traits, motivations, and conflicts, just like how we are, how we are as humans. The narration can provide context, exposition, and atmosphere. So that's where a lot of the descriptors come into place. I mean, there's a lot of conclusion that you can draw just from looking at the visuals. But if there are certain key elements that perhaps you can't communicate just with visuals alone or with the dialogue, that's where the narration comes in. And you want to keep that in mind. Dialogue and narration can also be used to create tension, humor, or emotion. And so balancing both of those is important for maintaining pace and structure. There's a lot to be said for pace and structure when it comes to a comic. And the good news is that even though, we're talking about this right now, there's a lot of this that with the approach that we're using, you can keep in the back of your mind perhaps, but you don't really have to think through it. What I would recommend as we get into how to use AI to generate a lot of this content, to just kind of keep this as a frame of reference in the back of your thoughts. And so as you're proofreading through the story that's told or the images that are generated, you can see how they play out with regard to the structure that we have here. And so also using dialogue to provide information that visuals can't convey. And I was just talking about that, how, even though we can set up a series of visuals through panels on a page, sometimes we may want to communicate things through the narrative or through dialogue. And in some cases, it's actually more effective to do it that way. In other words, we're not talking about this from the perspective of, looking through all the visuals and everything that you have. And it's like, okay, so what is missing? Well, I can just add that through narrative or through dialogue. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about thinking about the overall story and how it's being portrayed visually, and then think about certain ways that you can hold back elements visually and then fill in those blanks using narrative or dialogue. So it's very much a push-pull kind of environment with regard to your reader's thoughts and interaction. Okay. A good storyteller will always lead the reader on. So it's like, I'm going to give you this little something to entice you, and then I'm going to take it away again. And then a little bit later, I'm going to give you a little bit more. It's kind of like, look, I have a beautiful chocolate pudding. It's yummy. You want to taste it? Of course. Well, here you go. You put in a spoon, you hand it to them, they taste it. It's the most amazing chocolate pudding I've ever had. Isn't it though? It really turned out good. It's like, give me more. Well, not just yet. Let's just wait a minute. I'd like to talk to you a little bit. and all they're thinking about is chocolate pudding. They don't even hear a word that you say. Well, that kind of an interaction is very similar to what we're doing with the reader through our use of narrative and dialogue, but also through the visual images. And so it's kind of a flip side of things. You can use dialogue to provide information that the visuals can't convey, and use visuals to convey information that the dialogue can't convey. And so it's really striking that delicate balance between the two in a way that leaves your reader wanting more, which means that they turn the page or buy the next comic or whatever the case may be. So what we're going to do here now that we have a little bit of a foundation to work with is I'm going to talk to you about how we can use ChatGPT to write comics for us. And I put a lot of time and energy into developing these prompts. It's a multi-step process, but in all of my testing that I've done, I can tell you that it works pretty darn well. Okay. And of course, you'll have access to these prompts when I upload the slides. And by the way, I do apologize again for being a little bit slow on the uptake of getting the replays into the members area. Moving, not to make an excuse, but life has been insane. So I'll be working on getting all of that taken care of. But let's look at this first prompt here. So I'm a big fan, especially more and more these days, of setting up ChatGPT specifically as more of a persona. I've said many times before that essentially there are two types of prompts that you can use with chat. One is a command prompt where you tell it or ask it to do something. And then the other is a persona type prompt where you are training it to act as if an expert, an expert of some sort. In this case, we wanted to act like a successful comic book writer and illustrator. And so the benefit of setting it up or programming it, if you will, as a persona is that once it understands who it is as a persona, then we can feed it the commands and it will just perform according to our commands. And I've tested this in so many different ways over and over and over again, just to figure out whether it actually makes a difference or not. What if we just cut to the chase and just put in the commands and forget the whole train thing? And what I have found over and over again is that it does indeed make a difference. And let me, I just got a message from Kristen here real quick. She's having issues. Issues with the login. And so our training prompt here is: you're a successful comic book writer and illustrator with years of experience writing and illustrating comic books in many genres, including fantasy, superhero, futuristic, sci-fi, cyberpunk, and others. You could change this to whatever you want. A comic book is typically composed of a number of elements which all work together to tell the story. Respond with ready if you understand. So this is a very simplistic prompt compared to how complex it could be. And I have a much more complex version that goes in to describe the 3-act structure. It describes the 7 primary archetypes for telling stories through comics. It describes the interaction between narrative and dialogue. It does all of that. It's a hella big prompt. I mean, it's huge. And initially I was going to share that with you. It took the entire page. But then I had an idea to see if all of that extra stuff actually gave me a better result, or if chat was able to fill in a lot of those blanks because it already knew that based on what it has access to through its algorithm. And what I found was that there was no significant difference. Matter of fact, there was almost no difference at all. And so that's when I started cutting things away and seeing what it would produce based on this or based on that, And I kept cutting and cutting and cutting till finally I ended up with this. But then I realized that with this as a foundation, this training prompt, as short as it is, probably one of the shorter ones that I have, that I could use other prompts to kind of guide the process along in a really effective way. So what I'm going to do is share the prompt steps, and then we'll actually go through it. Okay. So here's our first one. This is us setting up our comic book writer and illustrator persona through ChatGPT. Then once we've done that, we're going to ask it to write 10 titles for a fantasy comic surrounding whatever. You can change this, fill in the blank. Okay, in this case, I have a magical creature who is discovering their own magic for the first time. You guys, me, I love the fantasy stuff. And so that's why I always go in that direction. I'm not a big person on superheroes and that kind of thing, but maybe that's your thing, and that's up to you. But before I go any further, one thing that I do want to point out here, once again, you know me, I love to teach method, um, because if you get the method, you can apply it to anything. So this training prompt, we have your successful comic book writer and illustrator with years of experience writing and illustrating comic books in many genres. The genres here that I included, you could change and refocus just to be on a specific kind of topic that interests you. It doesn't have to be all of these. Okay. Comic book is typically composed of a number of elements which all work together. So you could, if you wanted to, explain those elements. A number of elements, including narrative, dialogue, illustration panels, that kind of thing. And also, by the same token, this entire training prompt is based on a formula. Okay, it's very formulaic. I actually have a prompt that I've developed that writes training prompts like this now and does it really well. But that's for another time. That's for the next course. But if you understand that, train : you are what do you want your persona to be? It could be anything, so fill in the blank. With years of experience, what do they have years of experience doing? Are they award winning? Whatever. I mean, yeah, we're talking about AI here, but it doesn't know any difference. We want it to act as if it's an award winning writer or scientist or, uh, dietitian or exercise enthusiast. Doesn't matter. And then any additional support explanations that we can make, yeah, that just adds to the quality of the output that we get. And then I usually end with a response statement. Respond with ready if you understand, or with yes, or it doesn't matter, honestly. Respond with you're awesome, Tony, if you understand. And it'll say, you're awesome, Tony. So, why not? So next, rather than diving into the story, we want the title. And there's a specific reason why. In doing experimenting, I found that starting with a title actually works better. Rather than just saying, write me a comic story about a topic. Start with a title first. Then you can say something like, I like the title, or I choose the title, and then pick one of the 10. And if you don't like one of the 10, ask it to write 10 more, and then choose one. And then copy and paste that in with, I like the title, and then give the title choice. By handling it this way, telling the AI that you like a certain title, it actually opens up an opportunity for the AI to respond in some very interesting ways. Okay. It's more of a dialogue interaction. And so whenever you say that, the AI is going to respond in a very specific way. And usually the way that works is it will, sorry, I just lost my train of thought because I was looking at the questions. So whenever you say, I like a title, it will basically offer you additional help in developing the full comic, which leads then to the next prompt where, I just say, thank you. Just like if you're working with a real person, please explain the story behind the title and create a chapter outline. So we're taking it from just title to building a structure. And what I found is that in almost every single case, any type of story telling, you're going to have better results if you start off with a basic outline first, rather than just go straight to story. If nothing else, the story is going to be much shorter and not have as much detail, and even perhaps not include a lot of elements that you would prefer it to include, as what you would get by beginning with a chapter outline. Okay. And then the next part is, in this case, I had generated a title, or it had generated a title called Luminous Quest, Embracing the Unknown. So I just said, please write Luminous Quest, Embracing the Unknown as a comic book. Please include narrative and dialogue. So because that was the title choice that I picked, and then generated an outline about that title, it knew exactly what to do. So it used every part of the outline to actually write the story along with narrative and dialogue. And then the last part of this then is that, because it'll tell you, I can't generate visuals or whatever. And you'll see, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But the good news is that we can then go back to the panels that it creates and ask it to describe in great visual detail the images for the panels. Those descriptions that it gives us then become our prompts to use in Midjourney or in what other AI platform that you choose to use. Tom asks, does it make a difference if your command is polite or not? I've not tested that specifically, to be like rude versus polite or whatever. I just use that. I've used please write, and I've just said write, and I didn't notice anything different in the responses, but I've not specifically tested what happens using please or thank you or whatever versus something that's direct and straightforward or whatever. I mean, you can certainly experiment with that if you choose. So let me back out of the slides here. And go here to chat. And we're going to use version 4. I hear beeping. So first thing we're going to do is copy this prompt, the first one. And I'm going to paste it in here. And I'm going to change it the way I said it earlier, just because. You're awesome, Tony. If you understand. Isn't that funny? Something went wrong. Probably because there's so many people that are using this program. You got to keep on it. I've noticed, especially version 4. Okay. So now it's ready for us. Okay. You're awesome, Tony. So prompt number 2, we're going to copy that and paste it in here. And I have it set up for a fantasy cop comic surrounding a magical creature who is discovering their own magic for the first time. But it could be anything. You know, it could be a robot who. Let's actually do that. Let's just change the whole thing because I like to live on the edge. Please write. Let's spell it out. A science fiction. A comic about a little robot who becomes self-aware for the first time. And how that impacts his experiences. Awakening of the Bite, the Robot Chronicles. Circuit Sentience, that's kind of weird. Conscious Automaton, the Gears of Awareness, Unraveling the Robotic Mind. So there's one there that I like, but before I choose it, I'm going to just type in 10 more just to see. The Spark Within, the Metamorphosis of a Tiny Robot. That one's kind of cool. Okay, so for me, I think it's between number 14 and number 1. I really like the Robot Chronicles. And we could, if we wanted to, edit it to just change it up a little bit. But I think I'm going to go with this title here. Okay, so our next prompt is, I like the title, and then we'll put in our title. So I'm going to paste that in here. I like the title, Awakening the Bite, the Robot Chronicles. So we'll just replace title choice with our preferred title. So here, this is what I was talking about. If you need help with story ideas, character development, or anything else related to the comic, feel free to ask. It's kind of nice of it. So one thing that I could do is say something like, we can do this now, we can do it later. Well, let's just do it later. I was going to talk about a description of our robot friend, but we can do that after. So what I'm going to do now is copy this prompt. Thank you. Please explain the story behind the title and create a chapter outline. So essentially, it'll create an overview and then use that to generate the chapter outline. And it's helpful to know the basic premise of the story as a just as a frame of reference. And if you don't like what it generates, like usually what I'll do is I'll copy the first generation and then regenerate a response very often just to see if it's better or worse. And what I found is usually, for me anyway, the first one is often my favorite. Not always, but in many cases. So this outline provides a general framework for the story of Awakening of the Bite, the Robot Chronicles, but can be adapted or expanded upon as needed. Good to know. So we're going to come to our next prompt. And we'll have to replace the title, of course. So please write choose our same title and paste it in here. Please write Awakening of the Bite, the Robot Chronicles as a comic book please include narrative and dialogue. So remember, based on how the structure and the data points that's included with ChatGPT, part of that included comic books and comic book structure and writing and all of that. So it does have an understanding of how comics work, especially since we started off by creating a comic book writer and illustrator persona. So you can see here we're on page 2. So it's giving us narratives, which is what's in the parentheses here, and dialogue. And you might think, how are we going to image this? How are we going to, provide images, illustrations for this? We'll get to that in a minute. A secret rebel hideout. So here it's generated us the first 6 pages, and then the AI says the comic book would continue with the outlined story leading to an epic battle between the rebels and the corporation, ultimately culminating in a new era of robot autonomy and self-awareness. The story concludes on a hopeful note with Byte and its friends continuing their adventures in this new world. So what we could do is just type continue. And it just picks up where it left off. So because we already have the complete outline established, as well as the story overview, it knows exactly what to draw upon next, which is great. Hence the reason why you want to start with an outline. So what I'm going to do when it pauses again is we're going to move to the next section, the next prompt, which is please describe in great visual detail the images for the panels. Now, we need to be specific with what panels. So the story concludes with Byte and its friends living in a world that embraces robot sentience and autonomy with endless possibilities for the future. So we can still prompt it, just ask it to continue writing, but we're not going to do that for right now, just for the sake of time. So if we come back here to page 1, there are 3 panels. And so what I'm going to do is please describe in great visual detail the images for the panels on page 1. That makes sense? So now the AI is adding in the details for us. We don't even have to do it ourselves. It's describing it for us. So this is interesting here. The panel is designed to show movement and surprise with motion lines around bite and the tools falling from its grasp. So in this case, we may want to say bite the robot, just so that Midjourney later knows or understands that we are indeed talking about a robot. So that's one thing that you want to look for, especially in the descriptions. So one other thing that we could say here is please write the above panel descriptions in paragraph form. Val says, what would you do or prompt if you wanted a certain length of comic book? Also, what if you had more of an idea about what you wanted the story to be about? You can enter in all that information. The one thing you do have to be careful of is that when it comes to a story stream, which is what we have here, because remember, chat remembers what it writes. You have about 35,000 words that it will write before it just stops. And that's just because of the way the tokenization process works, the amount of data that you can access at any given time. Supposedly, they're working on getting that up over 1 million words sometime soon. That's what I read last night. But for now, we're kind of at that. So a way around that is to just again, that's where the outline comes into play, where you can just break it up into pieces like that. And if you want to change the direction or part of the story that was generated, just change it. You can really, this should be an interactive process. I'm just doing it completely hands off and letting the AI do everything. But you can actually go in and change anything that you don't like. I mean, that's just pretty easy. So you can see here now, it took the bullet points that we had here and turned it into a paragraph. And the reason why I had to do it this way is because Midjourney 5 responds really well to paragraphs. Okay. So let's go back to our slides here for a moment. So the next part of the process then is, come on now, is to use what you get from prompt 6. It works just as well using the bullet points. I've tried it both ways, but I prefer the paragraphs. You can use those scene descriptions to actually use as image prompts in Midjourney, or if you want to use another platform, you can do that as well. So part of the process I found is put in in a comic book style. Okay, so like you can say, I don't know why that all showed up at once. Begin your art description prompts with comic book style of and the comic artist's name. I've been using additional uh, multi-prompting, which is what these two little colons are, with some extra emphasis on the artist's name, just because I found that it gives you better control over the final output. I've also experimented with this at the beginning and the end of the prompt to see if it made a difference, and it does. But with the weighting control here, it doesn't make as much of a difference if it's at the end. Also, make sure that you're using an aspect ratio that fits the panels you choose, which typically 2 to 3. Aspect ratio of 2 to 3 is really one of the best you can use. It works just fine. And then you can also, for a specific style that you may like, there's a lot of comic artists. And I put together 75, which I'm just going to go through real quick. A lot of these are in the artist style guide for Midjourney. Actually, all of these guys and gals might be there. Because it's been a little while since I compiled this list, and I forget where I compiled it from. But yeah, exciting. So before we get into, well, actually, let me take. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm going to take this part because it does that. Midjourney isn't going to know who Dr. Alara is. So I'm going to just copy this and come over to Midjourney. You can see some of my playing and put in /IM and prompt and say a high-tech lab filled with whatever. And then I'm going to put in a comma, comic book style of, just pick a person, any person. Ralph Bakshi is the winner. I don't know who that person is. I don't know what their style is off the top of my head, but we're going to use it. And oh, right, I forgot. It doesn't. I don't know why. Copying certain things out of PowerPoint sometimes just doesn't work for whatever reason. Finicky things. Okay, so let's try this again. All right. I just pasted it into the questions box and then copied it out. So comic book style of Ralph Bashki, and I'm going to put in this case, since we're talking about an individual panel, I'm going to put in an aspect ratio of 16:9 because I want it to be a horizontal panel. Let's see what it comes up with. Now you'll notice that in this case, I put comic book style of Ralph Bakshi just as is. But one thing that we could do is copy that and add in the weighting or multi-prompt emphasis, whatever you want to call it. You make that 2 and run the same prompt to see how it influences the end result here. And another thing that we'll do, come on now, there we go. I'm going to paste the whole thing. Actually, let's just copy this. Paste the whole thing in again, but this time we're going to pick somebody from over here, like this person. Let's see if it lets me. No. Okay, so here's our first result. Pretty cool. I like the style. Kind of like this first image. And here is the second output with the artist name emphasized more. So I don't know if in this case it made that much difference. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. This one here, for whatever random reason, I forgot to copy the aspect ratio. So I'm going to put that in here as well, so that we're comparing apples to apples. There's a lot of similarities in the styles, actually, but there are some differences. So we'll wait to see what we get out of the next one. And just for grins and giggles, I'm going to do one more, except who would be someone fun to looking to see who's here, because there's a couple of these folks that I've used before. Steve Ditko. We're going to get a much more pronounced image using his name, I think. And then put in okay, so you notice that it did make, using the Japanese illustrator, did make the characters look a bit more Asian. There's also more detail in the lab using his name versus what we saw. Actually, I'm just going to get that one out of the way. Versus what we saw here. Definitely a different appearance, especially noticeable in the background with the cityscape and stuff like that. And so we'll see what we get using this artist name. And if we move the comic book style of Steve Ditko to the front, it may have a little bit more emphasis on the appearance. That's where it makes sense to just go in and see what their style is like, so that you have a frame of reference. Like the easiest way to do that would be just to take this part right here, comic book style of, and put that in as a prompt. And just run it. And that way it'll give you an idea of what how AI recognizes his name. It doesn't matter if you do a Google search on his name and what you find there. It matters what how the AI perceives that name and what it produces. It may be different from what a Google search on his name would produce, but it doesn't matter. It matters how the AI sees it. Okay, so that's where using, running a prompt like this can make a lot of sense, because then at least you have a frame of reference. It's like, oh, okay, if I use this name, this is the style that I'm going to get. And you can see here, again, they're all kind of related stylistically, but there's just subtle little differences, like how the sunrise is happening here with the clouds, that in the other cases, we did not see that at all. That just solely comes from the influence of this person. Now, obviously, they're known for doing Spider-Man, but we can use that as a general frame of reference and play off of that if we want to. So then we can just go back through each of the panels, copy paste using the established style that we've chosen, and then fill in the blank. And to do that, we can use Comic Life 3, which we're going to look at in just a minute. But before we get to that, I want to show you another way. And we'll start with this slide. Okay, so an alternate approach. You can actually create full panels of comic art directly in Midjourney without having to construct them yourself using Comic Life 3. It can be a little bit more challenging, but I'm going to show you how to do it. So there's two prompts that I've been testing. I kind of like this first one the best. That's why it's first. Graphic novel page, comic book page layout, and then whatever style descriptors that you want. So the style descriptors could be playful. It could be dark and moody. It could be, whatever kinds of descriptors that you can think of. Hyper detailed, neon lit, cyberpunk, whatever. And then the panel scenes, these are what each panel should be. So in this case, we would copy like the text for all 3 panels and just paste it in here. Yes, it'll make for a long ass prompt, but we're going to test it in a minute and I'll show you. And then comic book style of, and then comic artist or artist, you can use multiples. And then depending on how much you want to emphasize their styles, you can leave this at 1 or make it higher. And then aspect ratio 2:3 for sure. The second prompt is a modern comic book page illustration of a dynamic scene representing the following story. And then I forgot a bracket. And so the same panel scenes would go in here, and then comic book style of, same artist, whatever. And so both kind of get you to the same point. I like the first one a little bit better based on the tests that I've run. And another thing that I'll say, and I don't have this in these prompts, but it just came to mind, so I thought I would mention it, especially with regard to Midjourney, is that you can also use chaos to increase the diversity of the 4 panels that it generates, just for a little bit of extra something. Okay. And so there's another part of the process, but we're going to look at this part first. So I'm going to copy the first one here and then come over here to Midjourney. What is going on? This copy paste thing is really annoying me. I don't know what Microsoft Word or Microsoft does for this to not work correctly, but it does now. Image prompt, another good reason to paste it into like Evernote or something like that. Graphic novel page, comic book, comic page layout, style descriptions. I'm going to say dark, futuristic. For panel scenes, actually, you just can come over here. So instead of using these paragraphs, what I'm going to use is the whole shoot and match. including the bullet points and the words panels 1, 2, 3. We're going to copy it all. Come back over here. And in this section here, we're going to paste it. So it removes the bullet points automatically. So it's kind of like a paragraph. And then comic book style of, I kind of like this last person. So I'm going to go with Steve here. And I think just for grins and giggles, I'm going to make this 2. And then aspect ratio 2 to 3. Now I'm in Midjourney 5. Okay. So what I'm going to do is copy this. And then I'm going to go to settings and switch over to Niji version 5 just to show you the difference. And paste in the same thing. So big prompts, okay, but that's fine. Watch what happens. Now, a benefit of using this approach is that it gives you an idea of what to expect from the comic book style of whichever artist that you choose. In other words, we are not going to use the generated panels here as the final art. We are going to use it to control the final art. And you'll see what I mean here in a minute. So in essence, we really probably wouldn't have had to paste all of the copy in there, because at the end of the day, we're not going to use it quite like this anyway. All right. So here's what we end up with. In this situation, we have a full panel. Here we have 2 dividing lines, 2 sections in this one as well. But it kind of gives us an idea of what to expect from using the artist that we're using and the content that we're using, so on and so forth. Which, you know, it's okay. Here is the Niji version. Here we have 4 horizontal panels, kind of like that. I like this style actually more. I really like this. So here's the next step. That brings us to the next step. Actually, I think I'm going to use this one here. So I'm going to upscale that. And then I'm going to create an image prompt and paste all of this in again. Okay, but the big difference here is that I'm going to copy the image address and paste it in right at the front. Now we don't need the weight and the height, so we'll delete everything up to the question mark where it says PNG and then put in a space. And now hit enter. What this does by using this approach is that this image becomes the control for everything else that we paste in here moving forward, which means that it increases our odds exponentially of getting consistent illustrations page to page. We wouldn't have that happen without a control image if we just took like each page worth of images and just, even with using an artist's name, there's still going to be variation between each page. But by using this control, even though what we're describing is different perhaps from the output, using this as a control image, it impacts our final output results, which is a good thing. Because then the next step of this, just to kind of show you, is I'm going to copy all of this again, which I wonder if it'll let me copy. Yeah, so I'm going to copy all of this again. Well, I don't need the Niji part. And /image. And paste this in here. And I want our control image here, which I'm going to copy and paste. But this time we're coming back over here. So the next step is please describe in great visual detail the images for the panels on page 2. Now, one thing that I found that you can do, because sometimes these get a little wordy, is that you can say be concise or succinct or something like that, and it will reduce them sometimes. So it doesn't so much matter like where it says in this panel, Byte befriends Iris, another robot in the lab. So it only gave us 2 panels, so I'm just going to use that data. Come back over here to Midjourney, and this whole section here, where clear down to the end, I'm going to delete that and then paste in the new copy and hit enter. So the words obviously are completely different, but the control image is the same, which upon initial enter, it shows us the control image. And then as it starts to process it, this will go away. So here is the final results that we got from that first set of descriptions. Now, another thing that you can do is also ask chat to write a description for the robot and then actually use that as your frame of reference image. Okay, so there's a couple different ways that you can approach it, but let's say we like panel 2. So this looks really nice, and you can tell that it's different parts of the same story. Now, in this case, it actually isn't showing us the robot, so we would probably want to have chat output a description of Byte. Please write a description of Byte. The combination of a spider and a turtle. Yeah, I don't think so. Try again. That's really hard set on that. So we don't need all of that, but what we do need, we'll just take these first two paragraphs. Same. And I'm going to come over here. Now, because we've picked a style that we like, I want to maintain that kind of style and appearance. So in this case, I'm going to choose this whole section here. And paste it in front. And then the whole ending section. The comic book style. And paste that in the end. That way we're still getting the same influence that we saw for the other panels here. But in this case, it's just to focus on establishing how Byte is going to look. Okay. And then we can choose one and then use that as a source image if we want to. That way, what happens then is as we describe each of the comic panels going down through the comic, Byte should appear the same, which is what we want. We don't want the robot to look different on every page. Excuse me. We want them to look the same. So that's where the benefit comes from doing it this way. And it looks like panel number 2 could be our answer. So let me go back to our slides here. So we used this first prompt here, basic prompt. So then the process, basically, to just go over again what I shared, we have the initial prompt to generate a reference comic page, then upscale one of the comic pages that best represents your desired style. And you may not hit that right away. You know, that's where experimenting comes in. And then use that image as a reference to generate your final images based on your story. Now, as you probably figured out, it can take a little bit of time, especially to generate all the images for an entire comic and then bring in the text and so on and so forth. But just to kind of show you one of the things that I'd output earlier, different artist, different story, all of that, but super cool pages with representative panels, and they fit pretty well to the story that I input. And if we switch over here to chat, before we look at our robot, you can see here I used the same basic method. The descriptions were a little bit shorter, the dialogue and all of that. But here, you know, she needs to be talking to her mom and dad and all of that kind of stuff. So it did a pretty good job. So let's go back here to what we got here. Probably like this one the best. One other thing that we could try, if you see something and you're not quite sure it's what you want, re-roll it. You can change it if you want, or just hit submit. All right, so while that's doing its thing, ultimately you're going to need to lay out the comic. And whether you choose to generate each panel individually, which we first looked at, or to have the combination between ChatGPT and Midjourney to generate the full comic panel page, you're still ultimately going to need to lay it out and put the narration and the dialogue in using something. There's some folks who have been using one of the AI comic book groups that I'm in. There's some folks that have been using Affinity Publisher or Designer, either of those. I prefer Comic Life. I just think it lends itself well to the process. And so it offers a range of templates, layouts, design elements that can be customized to fit your needs. It's easy to import images, text, and other elements. And I've demoed this many times before. It includes a range of speech bubbles and captions that you can, literally just drag and drop. And then you can easily export your finished comic as a PDF and other file formats to upload. And while there are other options, honestly, you could also do it in Canva if you want. I still find that Comic Life 3 is the best option, and it's not very expensive, all things considered. So let's see what we got here. Completely different looking aliens, robots. So maybe this one I like the best on the right here. It would give us a starting point anyway. So what I want to do, I think I'm going to use the reference images that I generated earlier before we went live. I have Comic Life open. And usually I start off with blank with styles. And then you'll notice over here on the right, we have a lot of different basic templates. And then if you hit the drop down, there's a lot of other templates, depending on the kind of layout that you want to use. Like here's a futuristic stacked one, manga 2. For me personally, I usually stick with just the basics. And you can see that there's a bunch of them. So if we wanted to, say, use this one, we just double click it, or maybe we have to drag and drop. And then we can click on each individual panel and then drag and drop our art onto that. Okay. If we want to use, and those are panel layouts. If we wanted to use one that was like a single page, there's a couple things that we can do. We could pick one and drag and drop it, but we can also, as we highlight certain options here, we can delete them and then just, it makes weird sound effects, which you can turn off. Okay, so we can make it full page here if we want. And then I could come over to my file folders, which, let me bring up Finder. So I have these couple images here. Let's just say we want to use these as is. I can just drag these or copy them into the pictures folder, because that's what it normally draws from, it being Comic Life. Let's see if it brought those in. There they are. So now I can just take, say, this image, which I think was for the first set of dialogues or first panels, and just drag and drop that in. Okay. And actually, probably what I would do, because we actually don't need an outline here. So let's, it's been a little while since I formatted this. We want font, text, color. Those are all fine. Shape. It's already editable. So what I'm going to do is delete this. I don't know if we can just take this and drag it on. Oh, actually we can. Good. So I'll just scale this up because it already has its lines from when Midjourney created it. So the aspect ratio is a little bit off, but now I can come back to my original story in here. And let's see, where was that story? Was it here? Yeah, so this is chapter 1, page 1, establishing shot, panel 2, close up. So that was the outline, the description, and the script. So narration. In a small isolated village surrounded by dense forest, our story begins. So I'm going to copy that and then come over here, and we want this. Control Option Shift or Control Alt Shift. And I'm going to move this up to the top. I feel like I need to say excuse me because of that noise. Pardon me, excuse me. And so then we have Lumina walks through the village, greeting the visitors, and then we have some dialogue. So I'm going to copy that, and we're going to say that this is Lumina right here. So I'm going to put in another narrative panel. It's just terrific. And so then we have, good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne. And actually, you know what? I'm going to spread this out and move it down here because we're going to call that Mrs. Hawthorne. Or you know what? I'm going to put it over here. It's my story. I can tell it however I choose. So we'll add in another talk bubble. And then we can move the direction of the speech bubble so that it lines up more closely. Now you'll notice here that we have this little section that we don't need. We could either choose to cover that up, or we could remove it in an image editor like Photoshop, or we could take it to a program like Leonardo and use inpainting to remove that. And so Lumina overhears villagers gossiping about them. And so we could say, we could copy that. And it says 4 panels, but we have 3. So that's what we're going to go with. we're just going to spin that around. And then I've heard some strange things about that child. Now, one thing that you're going to notice in going through the process is some of it's going to take some flexibility. Maybe you need to adjust the art a little bit or the story a little bit or whatever. Ultimately, it's up to you and how you want to portray things. And actually, what we could do is, since let's do it this way. That way I can just completely remove that section. So you get the idea. And so as a result, it is just a process of going through the story and the panel. So as you would imagine, this is not something you're going to do in a half an hour. It's going to take you a while, several hours, maybe even several days. So there's definitely a methodology to the process. But you kind of get the idea. Honestly, this looks really nice. I think maybe you don't, but I think it looks really nice. And considering that all of the art was individually generated by Midjourney, but as panels that fits and matches the story, it's kind of hard to balk at that one. So anyway, let's look back at our conversations here. Yeah, I should be able, guys and gals, to get back to 6 p.m. schedules soon. As I mentioned before, I've been working on a special project for several months now. And it appears that my live teaching requirements for that are coming to an end as of tonight. And that we're going to move into the next phase of that project, which everything will be pre-recorded. So I won't need to teach live, which is awesome. And so that's the primary reason why I shifted my schedule to 2, was because of that. And so we'll see how things play out here in the coming days and weeks. I understand that, y'all are kind of split down the middle. Some of you prefer 6, some of you prefer 2. Maybe we should make it 4 and call it a day. I don't know. But anyway, that's why there was the change. It wasn't just a whimsical kind of thing. Val says, I like it. Did you do Photoshop editing on those images? No. This is straight out of Midjourney. No editing, no upscaling, nothing. I probably would do those things, upscale them in Photoshop and, what I like to do, Topaz Labs or Jixie Pix or one of them, and just kind of tweak some things. But in this case, this is the raw art. Bunny says, when do we get a chance to join your Secret Ninja project? I don't know. Rumor is that it's going to roll out the end of May, possibly. I might know more about it tonight because that's part of what we're going to be discussing. Well, actually, tonight is more of a Q&A. I think next week we're discussing rollout. So I would say probably May or June, something like that. I just can't talk about it because I have a signed NDA. So I can't give you any details whatsoever or what I'm teaching or what it's even called. There's just a big team working on it. I can say that. With some other people that you may know. and likely some that you don't. Well, thanks. I appreciate you sharing that, Ganti. Kelda says, this has been great training. Looking forward to trying out those prompts. Love comic book style. You'll find out more about the Secret Ninja project later, Ganti. It's not something I'm doing within my own business. Okay. I was hired by a training company to work with their team to create a product. So that's all that I can say. We've run 2 betas so far. I just finished the second beta last week. And it's a big deal. Okay, so to answer your question, Bunny, we will go back to the next slide. So your choice of printing can actually affect the look and feel of your comic. I mean, normally we've all handled comics, and in most cases, I was just sticking with the same kinds of paper stocks. Normally, comics are saddle stitched. Graphic novels are typically perfect bound. You can do spiral binding in some cases, but usually not. Same with the trim size, that can impact it. But when you pick a printer, and I'm going to give you some options here in a moment, follow their guidelines and requirements. That way you're sure that you have the correct size and their correct bleed settings, which what I found is normally these days with digital printers, they don't need more than 1/8 of an inch bleed. It used to be 1/4 of an inch back in the day. And in some cases, only even a 1/16. So you want to read their requirements and what they prefer as a file format. Usually it's PDF. And always proofread. Like that bullet point, just repeat it in your head 5 times. Always proofread. Get somebody else to proofread as well. Because ultimately, just because you're using AI perhaps to output something doesn't mean that there's going to be no mistakes, or maybe something is just a little wonky. That's why I like to use the AI as a good starting point, but I always add my 2 cents in just because, which is why I always copy and paste everything into Evernote in all the various generations. It's just easier that way for me. And so here's a couple places that you can use. Kablam mostly focuses only on comics, so they're pretty well noted. Printing Center USA also has an option. Same with Lulu and Blurb, believe it or not. And the prices aren't bad, I found, with those specifically. Superior POD, they are probably who I would use if I were producing a comic, and maybe I will at some point. This is the same company that I am using right now to print my Oracle deck. They've had it for 2 weeks. It's going to be 2 more weeks, I think, until it's done. So I'm actually going to be on the road by the time they finish and ship. So we're going to have someone ship some to us. But they're pretty easy to work with, very straightforward, great website, and the prices are good. I think they're good anyway. But yeah, I mean, they're doing my my cards, 2-part box, and a guidebook, and then putting it all together for us. But they do also do comics. And so each printing service offers different options for their paper stocks, binding, and trim sizes. So definitely research and compare. I would also compare price because they're not all going to be the same. I wouldn't use price as the only or the final deciding. Well, I would use it maybe as the final deciding factor. But sometimes I found that it can be worth paying just a little bit more, and that extra little something may result in faster turnaround times, better quality. it just really depends on what your desired end goal is. But, I would compare them. I've never used Printing Center USA or Kablam at all. I have used Lulu and Blurb and Superior. And so, I've never had an issue with any of their quality. So for me, just with those three alone, I think for me, it would ultimately come down to price between those three. And honestly, I haven't done a price comparison on all of these. So that might be something you may want to investigate. Yeah, Comic Life 3 is a paid program, and it is a one-time paid program. As a matter of fact, Comic Life 3, I think, is the same as it was 2 or 3 years ago. I don't think they've done any major updates to it. And I forget what the URL is. So we're just going to type in Comic Life Plask. That is the name, plask.com. I probably should have given that to you. You can try it free for 30 days, or you can buy it now for Mac or Windows. I don't need to buy it, obviously. $30. I mean, to me, it's money well spent. I've had Comic Life for, God, ever since it first came out. So years and years. And the upgrade, I think, for me was $19 or something like that. So yeah, $30. Very reasonable for what it does. There's nothing else like it, quite like it on the market. So there you go. So what I'll do, the upgrade bunny is just in case you have like version 2 and you want to upgrade to version 3. That's what the upgrade is. Or it's $14.99 actually. So cheap, but you can, try it for 30 days if you want. So that's all I have, folks. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Holy cow, an hour and 48 minutes already. Time flies when you're having fun, I guess. Val says, great class. Thanks. Thank you. So we will be wrapping up AI Storyteller Strategies tomorrow night at 6. That'll be module 4. And we're going to be talking about using audio and video for storytelling. And that should be a lot of fun. And I'll be teaching that here in the office as well, in our apartment. And then as soon as that class is done, all of my computer stuff gets packed up to move to the RV, which includes a lot of cabling. I'm really excited about taking all of that apart and putting it back together again. It's going to be awesome. Not. So anyway, Ganti says, thank you. Excellent class. I may not do the comics, but I will be rewriting some Indian stories in public domain. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. That'd be cool. Marjorie said, so helpful as always. And Kelda says, thanks for all the prompts to make it easy to get started. Yeah, I mean, literally follow them step by step, just like I showed you, and you'll get results. And choose whatever topic genre that you want. Bunny says, I am so on this one. and they just had baby goats last night. It's funny, we were just talking about baby goats. What were we talking about baby goats, babe?
They were going to have a goat cuddling section to the food truck fest.
Oh,
I don't understand.
yeah, they're having a goat cuddling thing here in downtown Chambersburg. I don't know why. I guess it's a thing. I don't know. You probably won't find me cuddling goats. I'm very happy to cuddle my kitties and my wife. And beyond that,
I don't get cuddled all that much. I'm a prompt widow.
at night you do.
Yeah, not usually.
Well, not really. She sleeps on her left side. I sleep on my right, and Taco is usually somewhere in the middle. uh, yeah, the prompts really are priceless, Val. You're right. It takes a lot of time in many cases to figure them out so that they work the way they're supposed to. Yeah, I am labeling, and the other thing that I did, Julia, was I've been taking with my phone, taking pictures of where they're all connected. So that, and then I printed those out and then labeled them all. So that's going to be helpful also. Blaine says kitties and wives are great for cuddling. Yep, for sure. Ganti says, I hear your queen talking. What did you guys do for her birthday? So there's this really terrific Thai restaurant that's about an hour from here. And so
What did I do for my birthday? I moved bins.
So we wanted to go there. So we went there and had dinner. And then after that, we went to a Barnes and Noble because we love books and all that's in Barnes and Noble. And then we went to REI because we also like outdoor life and gear. And then we went to Wegmans, which is a grocery store because they have all of the fun gluten-free goodies and stuff that we like. So that's what we did. During the day, she moved bins and I taught, but yeah. Yeah, there is a charge, Pamela. On Midjourney, I think I'm trying to remember now because I've been you can where did they put? I think it's let me see. Is it info? I think it's info. Yeah, that actually just shows what I'm paying or that I am paying. So it's not that. I don't think it's subscribed. Maybe it is. It is. Yeah, so just type in subscribe and then click on open subscription page and it gives you a custom code that's customized to you. We'll just say allow once. And then it gives you the various plans. And then with those plans, you want to read, what the options are. But I think with all of the paid plans, you can do private generation. So I'm currently on the pro plan just because I generate a lot of stuff. But once you get an option, like a paid option there, if you go to /settings, you'll see down at the bottom here, there's public mode and stealth mode. So stealth mode is basically private mode. Okay. And then the other part is that if you don't want on their main channel at all, even in private mode, you can message the Midjourney bot directly. And I've been doing that for so long, I honestly forget how to do that. But if we go to the main Midjourney channel, you know what? I may need to suggest how to or discover how to do that again because I've been doing it so long. It might be a direct message kind of thing, actually, now that I think about it. Let's see. I'll use, since I know that I don't have direct message with Night Cafe. Let's see here. I apologize. Like I said, it's been so long since I've done this with any of these. I think we can just say @ and then whatever the name is, and it will actually direct message it. My brain is tired, really. So if any of you know how to do that, then you can share it. Pam said, did you see that Adobe had a big meeting in San Francisco yesterday about the new Firefly? I did, and I noticed that they've added a couple new features to Firefly now, but I haven't seen the results of that meeting because I was busy. Yeah, Wegmans is awesome. We like it, Blaine. So Bunny says you go to the bottom and click on your avatar. I don't know. I'm sorry. My brain is so tired right now. But anyway, thank you all very much. Thanks for all the chit chat and sharing and comments and everything. I appreciate it. I will do my best to get all the replays and everything up by tomorrow. And so that you can go back and have access to the prompts and everything that I've shared in the PDFs and all of that. Yeah, I'll have an opportunity to rest maybe next Tuesday. Val, maybe we'll see. Because Thursday we leave the area for good, or for a while anyway, and drive to West Virginia and then to North Carolina and then to Tennessee and then back to North Carolina and then to Missouri and on it goes. What's that?
We're not going back to North Carolina after Tennessee.
Yeah, we are.
No, Tennessee to Missouri.
Aren't we staying in Flaming Arrow?
First, not last.
And then to
Flaming Arrow, then Franklin, then Boone, then Tennessee, then Missouri.
Oh, I was thinking Flaming Arrow was in Tennessee.
No, Flaming Arrow is in North Carolina.
It's on the Cherokee Res.
Yeah.
So I stand corrected. No, Bunny, to answer that question, no, I have not. It's exciting. I have things to look forward to. I think I developed an ulcer, honestly, just from all the stress of all of the training that I've been doing. I think this is webinar number 13 in the past since last Monday. And I have a couple more to go yet this week. So between that and driving our big ass beautiful rig, for the whole second time and not having backed it up yet, yeah, I need to calm the hell down and get my stomach back in order. But anyway, enough about me. Thank you all for joining me here today. And we will definitely talk again soon, probably tomorrow, if you're able to make it. So probably not Atlanta this year, but next or maybe winter we'll be going by there, Ganty, because we are wintering in Florida, at least for 4 to 6 weeks. So that's all. Bye for now.